My house had a garden I didn't cultivate, and now I'm trapped inside. The house was a steal. That should have been the first red flag. A spacious Victorian with wraparound porches and enough charm to look like it came from a postcard. But the price was less than a studio apartment in the city. I signed the papers without a second thought. The garden was a surprise. I noticed it the day I moved in, tucked behind a crumbling picket fence in the backyard. Rows of vibrant flowers stretched out like soldiers on parade, colors so bright they looked painted. Deep crimson roses, sun-yellow marigolds, and violet irises that glowed like embers in the twilight. A narrow path lined with stones wound through it. "It's beautiful," my new neighbor Mrs. Harper said when she peeked over the fence. "Though I'd keep an eye on it if I were you." "What do you mean?" She hesitated, glancing at the flowers as if they could hear her. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The last owner, well, she always said the garden didn't like being neglected." She laughed, but it was strained, like she didn't quite believe her own joke. You know how old women get. I regret not asking more questions, but I was tired and I had a lot of work to do. I spent the first week settling in. The garden required no attention. It thrived on its own, even in the blazing heat. Every morning, I'd wake up to find new blooms, some I'd never seen before. Flowers with petals like velvet, others with strange waxy textures that shimmered in the sun. It was mesmerizing, but something about it felt wrong. It was hard to put my finger on the heart of the issue. Or, fuck, I shouldn't lie. I was stupid, wrote my unease off as allergies, and otherwise ignored it. One night, near the end of my first week living in the new house, while I was unpacking in the living room, I heard a strange sound, a faint rustling, like fabric brushing against the floor. I froze, listening. It came again, louder this time, and closer. I glanced out the window at the backyard. The flowers were moving, not swaying in the wind. There was no wind. They rippled, row by row like a wave. My stomach dropped. I slammed the curtains shut and turned on every light in the house. Then I blared my favorite podcast so I didn't have to listen. Like I said, stupid. The next day, I decided to cut the garden back. I told myself it was just overgrown, that the movement had been my imagination. Armed with gloves and pruning shears, I stepped onto the path. The air smelled sweet, almost sickeningly so. As I snipped the first vine, I heard it, a faint whisper, so quiet I thought it was my own breath. Then the vine curled. I jumped back, dropping the shears. The vine coiled around itself, pulling away from my reach like a wounded animal. The whispering grew louder. My hands shook as I stumbled out of the garden, slamming the gate shut behind me. Was the sun brighter than it had been? The white walls of my house seemed to glow, and there were dark after impressions left in my vision. I called Mrs. Harper, demanding, "What do you know about the garden? Who is this? You know who this is. What do you know about the garden?" Silence answered me. I could hear the flowers moving in waves again. "Tell me, damn it! What's wrong with the flowers?" My voice cracked. My skin itched, and my eyes watered. Allergies. It was just allergies. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Harper said. "I told you they didn't like to be ignored. I have to go. Don't you dare hang up on me." Click. The line went dead. My eyes itched so much it burned. That night, I dreamed of roots crawling under my skin. After that, the whispers became a nightly occurrence. Sometimes they sounded like words I couldn't quite make out. Other times they were low, guttural, like growls. When I woke, there was a layer of near neon yellow pollen on all of the windows. I stopped sleeping, started keeping my bedroom door locked. I know you're asking, why didn't you leave? I just bought a house. Steal or not, I'm broke. So I stayed, and eventually, the vines came inside. It was subtle at first. A sprig of ivy on the windowsill, a thorn stem poking out of the floorboards. I yanked them out, only for more to appear before the day's end. They spread faster than I could fight them, bringing along that thick, almost coarse pollen. By the third night, they were everywhere, wrapping around furniture, snaking up the walls. I couldn't do anything about it. And the flowers started blooming inside. They weren't beautiful anymore. Their colors were unnatural, too vivid, and their petals oozed a thick, dark sap that smelled like rot. It was worst at night. Something about the starlight seemed to make them more active. I tried to leave, thinking if nothing else I could find a women's shelter to spend the night in, but the front door wouldn't budge. The vines had grown through the cracks, binding it shut. The windows were covered with thick stripes of pollen-coated green. While I raced from window to window, muttering, "Shit, fuck, God fucking damn it," under my breath, between body-shaking sneezes, I realized the garden wasn't just alive, wasn't just lonely either. It was hungry. I realized that when I saw the first flower open in front of me, its petals unfurled with a wet pop, revealing something sharp and glistening inside. Teeth. It lurched forward, shrieking. I threw myself back, arms thrown up in front of my face. Other flowers began to unfurl, their petals so fuchsia bright that it made my head throb. The pollen clung to my skin in a thick, itchy film. Once delicate daffodils now bared their fangs at me. The roses had more to bite with than just their thorns. Pure fear fueling me, I ran, barricading myself in the attic. What else could I do? If there were other outcomes, I wasn't finding them. Now I'm trapped. The whispers are louder, the walls groaning under the weight of the vines. They're closing in, wrapping tighter around the house. I can hear the vines slithering around on the floor beneath me. All I smell is a scent so sweet it's turned to rot. This morning, I found a rose blooming on my wrist. Its thorny stem burrowed under my skin like it belonged there. The petals are such a vibrant shade of magenta, it almost burns to look at. I don't think I'll make it out. If you find this, burn the garden, burn the house. Don't let it grow anymore.